Make way for the master of magnetism. Here's your look at the new Hasbro Marvel Legends Xmen 97 Magneto. Bring the excitement and wonder of the Marvel Universe to your collection with the Hasbro Marvel Legends Magneto and other X-Men action figures. This collectible 6-inch scale action figure is detailed to look like Magneto from the Marvel Studios Xmen 97. Magneto Marvel Legends figure is fully articulated with premium design and posable head, arms, and legs. This Marvel action figure comes with 2 accessories. Hasbro Marvel action figures 6-inch scale make them great for posing and displaying in fans' collections. Just before we look at this rather polarizing person, seriously, some people either like him or hate him. First, what we're going to do is I'm going to grab the tape measure and show you guys how tall the brand new Xmen 97 series Magneto stands. And then, of course, we'll bring in the other figures we've already had a look at, that being Gambit and Wolverine. In this case, Magneto stands about 6¼ inches in height, give or take, or the figure is going to be about 15½ centimeters tall. When last we looked at the 97 X-Men series, we did already look at Gambit, and we also already looked at Wolverine. And one thing that's quite apparent, at least for me, when I'm looking at the 3 figures now stacked together, is I think that Magneto is way too small. First of all, I don't think he's this short to when you compare him with Wolverine, for example. I feel like he should be a lot taller. But if you look at the measuring stick being, say, Gambit, I feel like Magneto should probably go at least to the same height, if not, maybe just a little less than, say, Gambit. He shouldn't be the size that he is. In fact, it kind of makes him look less intimidating by the size that they actually sculpted the figure in. Another way that Magneto comes up a little bit short is in accessories. The figure only comes included with a swapped-out pair of fist hands. He doesn't come with any magnetic effects, nothing that clips onto the end of his hands. I feel like they kind of went a little bit more generous with both Wolverine and Gambit, that unfortunately Magneto comes up again a little short on accessories. With only just fisted hands to work with, I'd much rather really just have the figure displayed with the gestured hands that he has right now. I mean, I don't even know if I'm going to have these for planned purpose at all. I might just end up putting him back in a Ziploc bag. But let's say, for example, let's say you're one that doesn't necessarily like these kind of hands for Magneto, never liked those kind of hands for Magneto. Well, if you wanted to, you just simply remove the hands from the provided pegs and then just pop the new fist hand in place. So I guess if you did want to curse Charles Xavier, you can also go that route instead. I guess one thing, it's not so terrible, the fact if you wanted to have like one hand like this and then the other hand sort of like this. Yeah, I guess worse things could have really happened for Magneto other than just the size of the figure itself. What I'll do for right now, at least, is I'll keep the hand in place, and we'll stick with his other hand then on the other side, and we'll get a closer look at Magneto. I'll tell you right away, not only is the size the one thing that's a little disappointing for the figure, but the other thing for me is, at least, I don't love the head sculpt. I really don't like it at all. There's things I like about it in some regards. Maybe it's just the eyes that take this away from me. Like, well, at one point, actually, first of all, let's just backtrack a little bit. When I first got the figure out of the packaging, he sort of looked more like this. And I feel it draws even more attention to the fact that his face is really square. You can look at it by just peeling away the flaps for his helmet. I feel like his head sculpt, first of all, is way too big down below. I did, though, heat this a little bit to kind of bring these a little bit closer together to make a little bit more intimidation to what I feel to be kind of a really comical looking head sculpt. I don't like the mouth. I don't like the nose. Maybe the nose isn't so bad. The mouth is, I guess, I don't know. It's a combination of something. Maybe it's just the thing about the eyes being a little off for me, or maybe it's just a combination of the fact that the eyes and the mouth don't look right together. But he has a weird face to him. And now, I have seen pictures, of course, where some people have already started to customize their 97 X-Men figures. Some have already taken a Magneto from another head sculpt, for example, and replaced it with this one. Because I think the body's okay. I don't really have any issues necessarily with Magneto's body. It's really, I feel, the head that delivers for this figure. From the side, it looks okay, but look, I mean, who's going to really display the figure from the side? And even from the side, he has almost more like a man-child face. They also have darkened the areas around his eyes, but then they've made his eyebrows really bright. If he has really cast shadows across the front where his eyes would normally be, you wouldn't also darken the eyebrows, wouldn't you? You wouldn't really want to leave the eyebrows completely untouched by darkness. I would much rather have they just darken the areas completely around his eyes, but even then I don't feel like it would have saved the face. Something is definitely off on Magneto's head sculpt, I feel. One thing I think I like, though, is actually the helmet. The helmet is more of a shinier plastic compared it really against the rest of the matte plastic that they use for the rest of his body. I like the way that they've used a metallic purple painted around. They trim, of course, the areas around his eyes, down the front flaps of where his mouthpiece would be. I think, one little random hair. Let me just remove that out of the way. So, I like the way they've actually sculpted this in more shinier plastic. It's unfortunate, though, that I have to still contend with what I feel to be such an inferior-looking Magneto's face. As for the rest of the figure's body, though, just to look at it, other than being just a little short on stature, I think, the figure's body is okay. It's making use of course, more of a matte red finish, and the plastic that they use works pretty good. It isn't even quite a dark red either. It's kind of more like a slightly more orangish red. The purple that they've used is kind of not quite the metallic purple that they would have used, say, for his helmet, but it still has a little bit of a sheen to it. As well could be said for the fact his lower trunks as well are also in that purple color. He's also got the purple down below here also in his boots. I think the way they've sculpted the figure looks pretty good, and I also really like the way they've sculpted the cape. It's a big, large cape, and it also brings itself away from the body. It's not close to his body in quarters. There's enough space allotted to the back. I mean, obviously, just because in order to accommodate that, it makes it for a little more of a floppier cape, but it's actually attached. It's attached right around to the front here, and I'm guessing they probably would have glued it to the front of his torso. But there's really, kind of in a way, I mean, there's a peg on the back here that plugs for all intents and purposes on the back of his torso, but I feel like that's not nearly enough to kind of keep everything in place. Part of me is almost even tempted to glue the peg into the hole, because it's not really necessarily going to interfere with the figure, even if down the road I decide I want to change out Magneto's head, for example, which I'm really tempted to do so. I don't think it's necessarily going to make any difference whether I've actually glued the cape in place or not. I might, I might just end up doing that. I'm not really sure. But the sculpting of the body, for again, small as it may be, it's a good look Magneto from basically this part down. One thing I also really had a problem with this particular figure, and me have also had similar issues too, is the way that they've actually attached the pegs. More importantly, the peg joint that's actually in the ankle. Never really had the issue with Gambit, and I never had the issue with Wolverine, so I never really even brought it up in their reviews, but I'll bring it up here. Where they actually attach the peg is not straight down. Obviously, in order for it to hinge the way that it does, they peg it right this way on an angle. They plug it essentially so it looks like he's sliding on his feet, kind of like slippers. The unfortunate thing about it, though, is getting this guy out of the plastic the first time, I couldn't move the ankle. I couldn't. Anytime I tried to move it, basically was doing this, and I thought there was a potential for me to break the peg. I ended up taking a few passes with the hairdryer. I'm not going to bore you guys with the sound effect for the hairdryer, but I made a few passes with the hairdryer, and that was just enough to soften up the peg. It still seems like it's very stubborn when it comes to moving, but I don't know, out of all the figures I've looked at so far, Magneto is really the only one I've really had issues with when it comes to his ankle pegs. Other than that, though, the figure will still have all the same retained articulation as other perhaps earlier looked at Magnetos. We did look at one, I guess, a couple of years ago also as well. And it's also going to have the very same kind of articulation as Wolverine, the one we just recently looked at. So Magneto's head is going to be on ball pegs. So it rotates all the way around. It hinges up and down, and of course also back and forth as well. But also to help aid in that ball joint, you can probably see for yourself as well, there's a little hinge joint at the top of the neck. That also allows the head for Magneto to look down. If you wanted to maybe, if he's a little more disappointed with the way they've sculpted his head sculpt and he's kind of doing a walk of shame, you can have the head angled down that way. Or you can have the head also looking up as well, that far. The shoulders come out, and you'll be happy to know as well, the cape doesn't get in the way of things at all, so you can easily bring the arms beyond the point of 90 degrees. You can bring the arms forward. Bringing them back is about the only time you're really going to run into problems, just because, again, the cape's going to get in the way of things. The figure does have a swivel in his bicep. Let's bring the arms down. The figure has a swivel in his bicep. The figure does have, unlike Gambit, a double hinge on his elbow. The double hinges aren't always the easiest thing to do, just because, again, he's got a really large bicep. He's got an equally large tricep as well. The figure also has a swivel in his hands. You can hinge those back and forth. Like always usually the case of Marvel Legends, you have an upper torso crunch, so you can bring him forward this way. You can also arch him back this way. That looks like he just has now broken his spine. And you can also as well swivel at his waist. The thing about the swiveling, though, is while I would initially have thought that they would have swiveled just above the belt, what they've actually done is they've attached the belt to the top of his torso. So when you are swiveling it, you are in fact swiveling the belt, the top of his trunks as well. Now, swiveling it too far, you can kind of see there's a little bit of a gap where the red is exposed underneath, but you're probably not going to be rotating it to that extreme. The legs are on ball joints. It allows quite a good range to swivel, and of course, to give Magneto a splits, you can do that as well. You can take the legs and move them forward. You can move them back. He has 3/4 of the way up the thigh. Once again, a swivel cut, so you can rotate the leg all the way around. Double hinge on the knee. No articulation here in the boot because for obvious reasons it's sculpted to the rest of the calf. But again, like moving the ankle back and forth was the hardest so far on Magneto. He really had a tough time, a real tough time, hinging that ankle back and forth. And with the ankle being as tight as it is, every time you're trying to do it this way, you just know you're pushing your luck, and eventually that peg is going to snap. Again, like bringing the ankle forward, it leaves this very awkward back section to it. Kind of, again, like looks like he's walking around in slippers. But again, like the ankle moves back and forth this way, and you can rock it back and forth this way. You know, while we were doing so well, I feel we were doing so well when it came to these X-Men 97 figures, having already looked at what I feel to be one of the best, being Gambit, and an equally good figure with that being Wolverine. It's unfortunately a bit heartbreaking, the fact that we kind of get an underwhelming, disappointing Magneto. Magneto really literally came up short, not only in the way that he's sized, especially when you compare him with Gambit. Gambit should not cast a shadow on Magneto. As little of a shadow he actually has cast from his helmet. And I feel also as well, like the head sculpt really under-delivers. Not that I have a big experience when it comes to Magneto figures, not that I have a huge collection of X-Men Magneto figures, but I would say, like, it's definitely one of the worst I've looked at. There's something just off about it, and I can't quite place my finger on what exactly it is. Could it be just the fact that they've given him just a very neutral expression face? Could it be also the fact that his eyebrows, for one reason or another, had to be the thing that stands out when you're casting a shadow across someone's eyes? Let not be the eyebrows still the thing that stands out like a sore thumb. Something, again, about Magneto just doesn't add up to me. And I feel like so far, at least of the 3 figures, of the 6 figure that we're about to have a look at, I feel like Magneto, by far for me, is the most disappointing. Now, I could very well be living in the past, but honestly, one of my favorite Magnetos, if not my favorite Magneto that we've gotten as a plastic figure, is not one that we got from Hasbro. Oh no, it's actually the one that we got from Diamond Select. The Marvel Select Magneto, I still think trumps the one that we got here from Hasbro. It's bigger in size, obviously. I didn't want to bring it in either because it would cast even more an obvious shadow of the smaller stature of Magneto that we got here from Hasbro, but I also think it's a better looking head sculpt on the one that we got from Diamond. It also looks a little bit more like the X-Men arcade, and maybe that's very well why I'm more biased towards the Diamond Select release. But again, it draws even more attention to the fact that this just feels for me like an inferior Magneto. If we were just not to look at the size, and sizing is really one thing that's a big deal breaker for this figure, especially when we eventually bring in the Bishop. When we look at the Bishop review, and I bring Magneto back, you'll even see how much even smaller he seems when you compare him with Bishop. But also the head sculpt. The head sculpt is the thing that I feel really ruins this figure. Now, I have seen several collectors of Marvel Legends not then swapped out this head sculpt with a head that we got from another Magneto to get a better looking Magneto. And you really shouldn't have to always do that when it comes to figures. Now, if you wanted, say, for example, like the one that was on the other Magneto and say, okay, you know what, I like that one a little bit more, swap it out by all means. But if you're swapping it out just because you don't like the one that's on this body, then that says right away that I think Hasbro delivered an inferior head sculpt for the master of magnetism. There's something just really off about the face, whether it be the nose, whether it be the mouth, whether it be a combination of the 3. It doesn't also help the fact that his eyebrows stand out as much as they do, when his helmet, for all intents and purposes, should be casting a shadow across his eyes. Why is his eyebrows still something that stands out as much as it is? Either way, though, unfortunately, if you were to look at this as a line graph, we've kind of been steadily going higher and higher with both first Wolverine looking good, and then being Gambit being the better of the Wolverine, the earlier looked at Wolverine. You would think that we would continue to steadily make our way up the hill until eventually we took a plunder when it came to looking at Magneto. I hope that the line graph at least corrects itself when we look at the remaining rogues, Storm, and Bishop. All of those reviews will be coming, of course, your way in upcoming videos. But what do you guys think of Magneto? Let me know down below in the comments section. Of the 3 that we've looked at so far, do you think this is a disappointing Magneto? Or if you have collected this figure so far, the rest of the X-Men 97 line, have you already swapped out this head with another Magneto? And if you did, which head sculpt did you end up using? Also, if you guys enjoyed this video, I want to hit with a like. But if you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing and you still want to stick around for the reviews of Storm, Bishop, and Rogue, not necessarily in that order, I think we might end up looking at maybe Rogue next. I don't know. I don't know. I'll look at the pile and kind of gauge it from there. But of course, we will be looking at those upcoming 3 reviews of the continued looks at the Xmen 97 line. So if that's the kind of thing you like to come back to this channel for, please make sure you're coming back here to check out those remaining reviews. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.